time to, of course, thank me, which you were doing offline. And
Namaste, Mr. Vikram, and thank you very much for inviting me to the symposium.
And what I will do, Ippei, is you will tell us about yourself a little later. What I have started doing is I ask people to tell me about the symposium. So let me put up the poster for this week. We have all these people this week. So Ippei, please tell us about the symposium, what you have seen up till now, what you have picked up till now.
Sure. Just before I can respond to that, I just want to acknowledge that I'm on in a country called Australia, but this area I'm sitting in is commonly known as a place called Adelaide, but locally by the Aboriginal people here, the original inhabitants here, is known as Ghana country. And I want to just share my respect for the people of the Ghana land, and also the people from right around the world who are potentially able to see this video. Just want to respect your elders, past, future. And so I just want to start off with that. And wanted to maybe respond to that question about the symposium. One thing that comes up to my mind is possibilities that can arise from these this conversation. Look, I understand this is an Indigenous symposium, but at the same time, look, it's an opportunity for people to be able to share their practices and also cross-pollinate some interesting ideas and practices and experiences, and also some challenges and maybe some laughter as well. But I think to organise something like this requires a couple of things to create that safe environment. So I just wanted to qualify that what I will be talking about in the Australian Indigenous context, I'm not an Aboriginal person, but and the way I'll be explaining, I suppose, my journey and sharing some of my learnings and my journey is in the context of a mediator who has been, I guess, like this conference, been invited to come along. So just wanted to say that was a pretty interesting way we connected, wasn't it, Vikram? Yeah. I think it was I think we connected on LinkedIn, and I think within 30 minutes we're talking to each other. So that was quite interesting. So again, technology does allow us to connect in different ways, and I think the word possibilities sort of arises from this dialogue. So.
No, I love the spontaneity that what happened. Let's meet. Come on, what's the Zoom link, and we are on. It's lovely. That's exactly the way it has to be, because I think I actually sometimes can't. I mean, you do it, but someone says, okay, we'll meet after 2 weeks at that time. For me, it's like, what am I going to be doing 2 weeks from now at that time? But it does happen. Then you put it on your calendar, and yes, you do it. So, Ippei, but you now have to tell us about yourself.
Sure, just by way of background, I'm Japanese by background, and I know I've lived in Australia for just over 50 years now. So I've been here for a very long time, and my parents were living in Sydney, and while my mother was pregnant, she thought to be in a more comfortable environment. I was born not far from Hiroshima, and that's where my family are from. So Hiroshima, you're probably aware of the name, but yes, my grandmother is a hibakusha. She's a survivor of the nuclear bomb that was dropped in August 1945. My mother's country is from the north, and that was unfortunately wiped out by tsunami. And it's not the first time her village has been wiped out. So my connection to my motherland, if that's the correct word, I guess it is getting more challenging, and hopefully I'll be able to reconnect again because the pandemic has not allowed us to return to visit. My practice as a mediator, and I think having listened to a number of your presenters, recordings, because I want, unfortunately, the live sessions are a bit late for me to attend in person, live in person. But I think we do come off a very interesting background, and I guess I can also attest to that. I think my career started in a totally different industry, from aviation industry through to working across government departments, and also being involved with the union movement as well here in Northern Territory. And then I think what tends to happen is these different experiences actually add more and more. And I guess what happened was when I was living in a place called Northern Territory, and I highly recommend if you have an opportunity, I think she was presenter number 3, Helen Bishop. She's an amazing woman. She's actually one of my mentors. So I think she would be able to best tune into her channel on YouTube, because I think her presentation was fantastic. And I think she did mention she was doing her PhD, but I think she's actually submitted her paper. So we're very looking forward to getting some fantastic results and being able to call her Dr. Bishop. So I'm very excited to have her on board as part of this, this symposium. When I lived in a place called Kakadu National Park, and some of you might recall many years ago, there was a movie called Crocodile Dundee. And it's about a white man who lived up in the Northern Territory wrestling crocodiles, etc. I was actually living out there at the same time. And this national park called Kakadu National Park is about 200 kilometres north-south and 100 kilometres east-west. So it's actually quite a huge area. And the Northern Territory, and for people, for context, I think it's about the size of Belgium, or about twice the size of Texas. So it's quite a big area. But when I was living there, I had the opportunity to work as I was a bush pilot, so flying small aeroplanes into remote communities, because a lot of the rivers would flood, and it would be almost impossible to drive across there. So I'd be flying everything from food to medicinal equipment, to doctors, to technicians to fix telephones, to these remote places right across Northern Territory. However, because there was so much tourism interest, people wanted to, on the back of this movie called Crocodile Dundee, we started seeing a lot of American tourists and German tourists and French tourists, and then Japanese tourists as well. So I was actually invited to say, look, you know, we need some help as an interpreter. We're seeing a lot of bird watchers or ornithologists and anthropologists and archaeologists coming from Japan, who were just genuinely so fascinated about this amazing national park. And so I was pretty much thrown in the deep end. I knew where to find things on the map because I was trained as a navigator, but then learning more and more about the wildlife, the Aboriginal culture, and the Aboriginal art, and of course the crocodiles, because that was definitely something people wanted to see. And I had to learn from scratch everything that needed to be, I suppose, explained as a tour guide. However, the type of people who traveled from Japan, they were professors and university lecturers. They weren't just looking for, they're actually looking for a high-level interpreter, and they wanted a high-level experience. And the world travels right through the South Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa, and so there was actually a lot of enthusiasm by the national parks and also the traditional owners to welcome people to share some of their knowledge. So I was working as an interpreter guide, and I had probably the best notes in the world in Japanese and English. Everything I ever wanted to know about birds and plants and what is edible food, bush tucker, we call it. And then we'd go to the ancient Aboriginal paintings. Some of them would date back to 80,000, sometimes older. And some of the last paintings were done in a place called Norlangi Rock around the 1960s. And throughout the whole history, during Ice Age, or when the ocean was so far away, the area was more like a desert. in those times when it was more like a desert, it was actually easier to throw a boomerang because there won't be so many trees. So you can actually work out that when there weren't that many trees, if you see a picture of a boomerang being thrown, you can deduce that it'd be about 8,000 years ago, just roughly. They're the newer paintings. And then we started looking at some of them more. And then there was a period where the ocean levels came up and all this beautiful food, the fish, the bird life would come together. And I learned a lot about the Aboriginal artwork throughout that time from the Aboriginal elders. And I actually built a good rapport with many of these elders because many times they were my passengers who got stuck while they were going shopping or they needed to go see medical treatment. So I actually built a great rapport. And so the Aboriginal elders had shared a lot of their stories and they actually came on some of these tours. And then they would show some of the most magnificent artwork and they call it X-ray style. So it's like a painting in ochre and white pigments, but you can see the skeletons of the fish and you can see the skeletons of the bird, humans as well. And it would actually, and when you think about it, there must have been an abundance of food for people to actually say, okay, I wonder what's inside. Instead of eating it straight away, they actually had time to actually learn about what it is. So they're actually this amazing artwork created and it was so anatomically correct and it was just fascinating. And then some of the paintings also started telling stories. And the more and more I learned about those stories, I started recalling some of the stories that I had actually learned in Japan, ancient stories. So the Japanese anthropologists, archaeologists, the bird watchers, will be visiting some of these ancient art sites and I'll be explaining it with one of the elders and I'll be translating. Yep. And then I'd actually say a few more things. And I said, hey, actually, do you realize we've got that in our own culture as well? We call that the spirit of lightning, for example, the Namagon man. And they said, oh, we have a Inazuma man. And people go, oh, yes, yes, yes. And I was actually connecting something quite interesting. I was connecting two quite different vast cultures, but they had something in common. And look, I don't have authority to talk about a lot of things which is sacred to Aboriginal people, but broadly speaking, I think what I found very fascinating is that almost every culture in the world has some kind of spirit that resembles a dragon. And I see that in Europe, I see that South Asia, I see that in East Asia, and same in Australia. And I thought, wow, isn't that fascinating? It's like, no one actually recalls maybe dinosaurs, but they actually have this wonderful connection with something ancient and so powerful, and it's still recorded in the paintings. And I got more and more curious, learning more about this. And then for some reason, I decided to do my law degree as a mature age student. And while that was happening, I had a very good friend who was one of my first mentors in the mediation. She encouraged me to do mediations. And while I was at university, I started doing my mediation studies. Fast forward several years, I think I did a number of jobs unrelated to mediation, working in bureaucracy. It was actually a fascinating area to work in, working in civil litigation as a very young lawyer. But then I had this opportunity to work for the government-run mediation service that was out of the courts. And that was when I met people like Helen Bishop. And I also learned more and more about the realities of the sad realities of people living in Northern Territory. So just to give a context, I mean, this is all publicly available information, but like, whilst in Australia, 2%, roughly 2% of the population identifies Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander. However, when we look at incarceration rates, we're looking at more than 80%. And I don't think that's a unique situation particular to Australia, but it's something that I've heard that happens with the First Nations people in North America. And And because I worked in bureaucracy, I actually sort of had this sense like, well, not only is this absolutely ridiculous why this is happening, but what is it? What's the cost to government, to people, to future, to people? And it was at that time when I came across a report that was done by the Federal Court of Australia, and it was known as the Solid Work Us Mob Are Doing. And it was a number of stories about mediation projects that were delivered right around Australia. And it was just case studies, de-identified. And there's one story about mediation that was happening in Western Australia in the Kimberley region. And that's, and I'll let you look it up, but Solid Work Us Mob Are Doing. But that story in the Kimberleys actually refers to the work that Helen Bishop was doing. So there's another connection there. And there was also 3 other projects happening in Northern Territory. One was in the Tiwi Islands, which is located just north of Darwin, and also in Central Australia. I was given the opportunity to run the mediation service. And so I was able to deliver this mediation right around Northern Territory, albeit with quite a tight, very tight budget. And our legislation basically said, our aim of the legislation, the Community Justice Centre Act, was to promote mediation. I thought, oh, wow, that's pretty open. What does that mean? And it's probably whoever wrote that legislation, and I have a feeling I know who that might be. So I think he wrote it that way so that there is enough flexibility rather than just saying to resolve disputes. That's just a very, very rigid way of describing mediation as a service. And so I thought, okay, so promote. So I scratched my head and said, okay, well, let's have about 25% of the population is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Northern Territory. So let's make sure that at least 25% of our work is dedicated to that area. I thought, no brainer. This makes sense. And but how do I go about it? I'm not Aboriginal. I know that there's a lot of people in jail. There are people who are interested in this space, and there's been mediation programs come up and disappear over the years. And I hope that this discussion may be useful for people who are looking at sustaining a mediation service within your respective jurisdictions. But there are just so many intricacies. But I guess what really, really needed to occur was to build that level of trust. Without trust, we're nothing. And we can say that we resolve disputes, or we can say that we're neutral, we can say that we're confidential, we can say that we don't take sides, but what does that mean at a community level? And during that whole period, another thing was emerging around Australia that was called the National Accreditation for Mediators. And it's known as the National Mediation Accreditation System. And so there's a lot of organizations, and I see it in America, Europe. They offer like a 30-hour course and with an assessment, and it's based on role plays. In Australia, there's a minimum of 38 hours, which makes it very difficult to try and squeeze in 38 hours in 5 days, because that's your working week. But that became the standard. And needless to say, that's how I became accredited. But I thought, well, how does that relate to people in communities? How does that relate to people who have family responsibilities? How does that relate to an elder in the community who's trying to resolve a conflict? But if the mediation standard says, no, you can't take sides, how are you going to manage that conflict of interest? because if you apply the Western model of mediation, it means that you can't, you'd have to disqualify yourself because I know both parties. And everything and all the research is telling me that, look, there is traditional mediation that's been, forms of mediation that's been on for centuries. It's like, how do we honor that? And this is where I met some amazing people like Helen Bishop. You may or may not heard of a person called Peter Adler, who's based in Hawaii, and he's done a lot of cross-cultural mediations with the form of Honomanopeo, which is involving culture and ceremony. And again, that book, which I referred to, The Solid Work Us Mob are Doing, kept on referring to culture. So needless to say, I'm still conscious that I'm not Aboriginal, but then again, I'm not white either. In fact, here I am in Darwin, which is up the very, very top of north of Australia. And February 14th, I think it was, is an important day in Darwin because that was the bombing of Darwin Day. So go back 70, 80 years ago, my ancestors were involved in air raids right across the top of Australia, and a number of people did pass away as a result. And there again, back, and this is going back a couple of years now, but like, I'm actually running a peace centre, a Japanese descendant in Darwin. I thought, well, this is pretty cool. And we did actually have an opportunity for the former Japanese pilots. I think they're all elderly now, they're passed away now, but they actually came to Darwin to lay a reef. So there was I was involved with the interpreting of the reconciliation, and there was the Australian soldiers who were trying to shoot the Japanese pilots down. And around that time, I was actually, like this symposium, I was invited to an island called Tiwi Islands, north of Darwin. And that's where Helen had been working with the people, with the women, on a project to establish a mediation panel or a group. And Helen and I were discussing about, what do you think? Mediation training, and what do you think about accreditation for Tiwi people, Tiwi mediators? I said, oh, that's interesting. And so we conducted many visits over 2 years, and we did training, and gradually over 2 years, we worked up to 38 hours, and we actually did an assessment. Now, you might think, okay, well, how did that all work? And why was accreditation important? Well, the Tiwi people are very, very, very proactive people, and they know how government funding works. They thought, okay, if we become nationally accredited, we can't become policemen tomorrow, we can't become lawyers tomorrow. However, if we get national accreditation, maybe that could attract resources and funding and recognition. So that's really cool. Let's do that. Now, I think I mentioned that there's a national standards called the National Mediation Accreditation Standards. That's how I got accredited. Yep. And you do the 38-hour course, do the assessment, video, usually a video assessment. Yep. And then the video gets sent off, and then you find out your result maybe 4 weeks later, whether you pass or not. With Tiwi, we, as in Helen and I and the elders there, we had to think of something quite different. So there's the national mediation standards, and we thought, okay, hold up, what is the Tiwi standards for mediation? What is the Tiwi Islanders standards for mediation? And I think you know, Helen and I, we knew the answer, but we need to make sure. We reckon the Tiwi Islander standards are higher than national mediation standards, and it was by far more complex, far more solid, and they have a far more, I suppose, whereas we might just say confidentiality. It's confidential, we can't talk about it. How do the Tiwi mediators maintain that on the island? Almost impossible. Everyone on the island knows. As soon as I organise a meeting by the beach, everyone knows. How do I remain neutral? I don't take sides. If I'm an elder, one elder in the community, of course I'm going to look after my family. It's like grandpa's going to have to look after grandkids. And how do you create a safe space where there is potential for violence? There is potential. We're talking high volatility. We've got mental health issues. We've got trauma and many, many aspects that all need to be addressed. So what we did was that 2 years we were working on the island, we actually helped work out and map out what it is to become a Tiwi mediator. And we wrote all that on a wall one day, and I think we took over 2 large walls of a building, and then I put the national mediator standards on the other side. And so I said, let's just do an exercise. Okay, this section, tick, 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 tick. It was actually quite an issue. And we said, but then we actually said, to become a Tiwi mediator, you need to incorporate all these other things that is unique to the environment. And I guess we talk about it broadly. We talk about the skills, knowledge, and ethics. That's the broadly speaking, the NEMAS, the National Mediation Question. That's what they assess you on, your knowledge. And the more knowledge, skills, and experience, knowledge, skills, and ethical understanding you have, they call that experience. Yeah. So it's like a Venn diagram, if that makes sense. Yeah. So if you've got knowledge, skills, and ethical understanding, if you've got lots of that, it's no good just having a mediator or like I don't know, someone who's got lots of knowledge in law, legal knowledge. If they don't understand the ethics of mediation, they're not going to become a good mediator. Yeah, it's just the reality. And we see that all the time in the dominant culture. We see a lot of people who got that experience in legal. They say, yes, I've got lots of experience in conflict and resolving things in a legal way, but they don't understand the ethics of mediation or too scared. So what we had done through this process is actually identify what are their knowledge, skills, and ethical understandings. Now, to create a mediation, and I think we do this all the time, whether you're doing a mediation in one of the conference rooms in court, or whether you do mediations in a family sense, or whether you're doing a mediation on a beautiful beach on Tiwi Island, we're always thinking about the safety for everyone. We're talking about the physical safety. We're also talking about people's emotional safety, but we also need to know the cultural safety. And something that Helen mentions quite a bit is basically being able to ask the right questions, that culture part. If I'm not part of that culture, is being able to be culturally astute to ask the questions. And it's not only being invited to be there in the first place. So I'm not there as a person who says, I'm here to fix everything. I have to work out how I can be invited to be there and how I can be culturally approachable. Should I be in this room with women? Should I be, and what is the cultural kinship connections? So understanding why this man is not allowed to speak to that woman, and why that woman is not allowed to even look in certain directions, and she can listen, but only through a different party, or the location. Being able to understand that, okay, well, this is not a great environment. We need to go somewhere else. And then try to work out the cultural nuances. So that was, I suppose, like a big cooking pot of all these different ideas and practices. And then we sort of tie this in of, okay, well, what is going to be interesting for the mediators on Tiwi Islands? Is it the fighting that happens after a football match? Is it fighting that happens between two children at school? There was one area that they were really interested in, and that was with their families who are still in jail. And they really wanted an opportunity to heal and have an understanding before the prisoners were released. So to put in context, in Australia, well, in Northern Territory, life imprisonment means that it's 25 years. And after 25 years, they can technically go and they're free. But prisons, they're sometimes a bit nervous. They go, okay, well, if you get released, what happens? Where are you going to live? And there's a word for this. It's called recidivism, which is where people leave jail and they come back to jail because they commit another crime, because there's nothing for them. Well, there's no plans for them. So we created an opportunity to train mediators to be involved with the prison mediation. So it's a restorative project. Now, unlike most restorative justice projects, the victim is often dead because it's been killed by the offender, and that's why it's a life imprisonment. But that does not stop that offender from being a Tiwi man or a Warlpiri man, or it doesn't take away the fact that they're Japanese or Australian. They need something rather than ending up causing another crime and just ending back in jail. Of course, from a government point of view, that's very, very expensive to incarcerate someone. So we did some training around that. And I remember one of the participants, he said, "Oh, Ippei, oh, that's a good one. That's just not going to happen." And 6 weeks later, we actually did our first one. And we went and visited a man again. He's been there in jail for 27 years. And he was actually released, but he just didn't know what to do. He got involved with drugs and got into a fight back in jail. And part of that was, I guess, like his lawyer worked a bit too hard to get him out, but didn't actually have any plans for him. And there was no sense of healing. So up in Darwin, it's very tropical. So we had the meeting over a couple of attempts. So we'd initially attend the prison with some of the elders, and then we asked the man whether he'd be interested in sitting down with the victim's family. And then we go back to the island and we give them 1 month to think about it. Then we come back after 1 month and then we have the same conversation. And we say to the man in prison and ask him, "What have you thought?" And this man in this particular case says, "Oh, Ippei, I've been thinking about what you said for every day. For 30 days, I've been thinking about what you said about this meeting." And we thought, this guy is ready. So we said, okay, we will start the process. And then we asked the man, we're going to go back to the island, but we need to talk about who we should be talking to first, not second, third, or whatever. And we will make that happen. So that's trust. Yeah. So when we went back to the island, the mediator team, we spoke to this one lady and she was surprised as why me? And of course, other people says, "You should be talking to me first." He said, no. This man said he wanted us to talk to this lady first. It upset people, but we had to honor his word. And there was probably very good reason, which for cultural reasons. And she thought about this for maybe 2 days. And then we got a call and says, we need to have another meeting on the island. So we had another big meeting. And that time she had got a good group of people and said, "Tell me what this man is thinking and then we're going to decide. So, look, with restorative justice programs, I mean, like to fast forward, the meeting went well. The man did go back to the island, and he's now passed away. He's actually, lived out his dream, because he was quite sick anyway. And in his last days, he was last seen riding his bicycle, and he had a job as well. His job was to make sure his grandchildren go to school and teach his grandchildren go fishing. But that meeting underneath the big mango trees was at the prison. The elders who came along, it always starts with the who question. So the offender, the victim's family, having the right mediators. Now, the right mediator, it always depends on context where you work in communities right across Australia. So in Tiwi Islands, there are 4 major kinship groups. There's the rock, the sun, the pandanus tree, and the mullet fish. And all 4 elders from that clan group attended every one of those meetings. Yep. If one wasn't there, the meeting had to be stopped. That was really, really important, because the victim's family were from this middle family. They were literally sort of falling over, but the other 3 would always help them stay straight. So on Tiwi Islands, there's what they called cemetery poles, which are like big logs. They come up from the ground, and they're painted beautifully and with ornate carvings. And they talk about those cemetery poles in a way. They said, okay, well, up the very top, it's in 3 parts. So for my Japanese culture, we talk about the pagoda. There's 5. There's earth, wind, fire, water. Yep, there's 5 elements. Yep. But in Tiwi culture, it's the 3 elements, which is the grandparents, the parents, and the child. And for the pole to be standing still, to be strong and straight, requires the top, the grandparents, to be strong. If the grandparents are falling over, it falls over. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So it's a very good way of describing how strong the elders need to be, because they effectively support the whole family. It was but by being able to celebrate their culture in that way, but also tied in with contemporary values, because it's a very strong Catholic community. So they actually had the prayer of nativity, and as part of that process, and they actually gave themselves a name, and it's known as the Ponki Mediators, P-O-N-K-I Mediators. And Ponki means it's finished, and that hand movement, which I'm doing, just means that it's not in a legal way, not reviewable. It's finished. It is finished. You can't dig up the past. Yeah. But for that Ponki ceremony to occur, all 4 elders from that group must be there to be present, and there's no the Supreme Court judgment where you have one person dissenting. It's got to be consensus. It's got to be all 4. Yeah. And so when it was Ponki, it was over. And from that point onwards, that man was allowed to come back. So I guess what I'm trying to highlight here is that was one of our earlier attempts at mediation. But what happened after that was that the Tiwi mediators got more and more confident, yeah, and they were doing more and more complex mediations involving restorative work. But not only that, if there was any issues, even playing football, yeah, they would always make sure there's 4 referees from different skin groups. Never a problem. Of course, This relates to having proper decision making. This equates to good governance. And when good governance is happening, people make good decisions, yeah? And that reduces conflict. And because it doesn't create the one clan group negotiating with a mining company or a timber company or a fishing company separately, it creates a good decision-making mechanism, and it stopped a lot of the internal conflict. And it was certainly that model is very unique to the Tiwi Islands. But then because I was working right across Northern Territory, my job, like yourself, Vikram, is to create opportunities. So I would invite some of the desert people from the desert, Central Australia, to come and meet the Tiwi people, and they learn about their practices, and they go, oh, that's good. We're going to try ourselves. But in our community, we don't do cemetery calls. We do things differently. You've only got 4 kinship groups. We've got 16. But it created such an exciting dialogue, and people were just saying, okay, but they actually saw possibilities that they could actually look at having a community justice centre. That was sort of, I'm putting it broadly, but in various communities right across Northern Territory, they've created mediation groups, and they call them justice centres. Some people call them the Shield, which is known as the Kuriji, and Large Manu community, which is, it takes about 5 hours just to get to Darwin. So it's quite a dusty road, and it's quite very, very remote, but the very traditional people. And it was, I guess, like that cross-pollination of ideas also travel across to Queensland. And what we also learned was the more and more we did the work with the Aboriginal people and just gave them these opportunities to share ideas like we are with these type of forums and share the issues that are happening. And a common issue that we'd often come across is this thing. It's called a mobile phone, and all the gossiping and all the troubles they make. And it's not just Facebook, but nowadays it's Snapchat and all sorts of things that and people making fake accounts. Now, I'm sure in any culture it's culturally inappropriate, but we were seeing young people, creating profiles of fake profiles, yep, and putting up fake news. And sometimes it was very, very offensive. It'd be like creating a profile of someone who's passed away and saying, and then they'll try to cause trouble in the community and says, I'm a ghost. That's, and creating such mental health and all sorts of issues. There was even, and like, whilst there was some good news happening in some communities, in the other parts of Northern Territory, there were also some huge issues with fighting in the communities. There was community unrest, there was police intervention, there was riots, there were people getting killed, people getting incarcerated, and there was no better time for promoting mediation, and that was part of my mandate, is to promote. And I'm sure the people who've attended many of your sessions would agree that peace work can be quite isolating and quite lonely work, especially when you are in the community. You're the 24 hours, 7 days a week mediator in your community. There is an expectation from the local police that you're the elder, you should fix it. It's not simple as that, but there's an expectation. And I think we just throw the word, oh, you're an elder, you should be able to, I think we hear that too often, but we don't give them the support, yeah? Because the elders, yes, they are elders because they have the skills, they have the knowledge, they've got the ethical underpinnings, and they've got the cultural connections, but they don't have the resources. even a car, even a mobile phone. I mean, like in many of the communities that we worked in, didn't even have a mobile phone, cell phone coverage. So the challenges for the elders, not only to practically do the work, but also provide the practical support, was so lacking. Some communities were very lucky, but unfortunately, government is very has a reactive sense. They don't do preemptive. They don't set up a mediation centre where there's no problems happening. They seem to create mediation projects when there has been something terrible happen, and to expect a community to sort of change, you know, within 1 month or something like that is just not going to happen, because, you know, people are forgetting that some of the issues are forgotten, or they can't see it because they're in jail. So to develop a capacity for mediators who are willing to go visit people in prison, regardless of whether they're family or not, and creating a and having resources to drive out to communities, visit people, talk to people, etc., takes a lot of effort. And so what I'm and unfortunately for one community, they did actually have a major riot, and people did pass away as a result of the fighting. And this, again, like when there's fighting, there's people who are don't feel safe in the community, so they become refugees in their own country. So they, a lot of them travelled 1,500 kilometres away to seek shelter and safety. Now, when we got that type of situation, one or two mediators just it's just impossible to do that work. Yeah. So to develop a network of people right across Australia who can actually say, okay, so I've got people who are in jail 1,500 kilometres away. I've got some people who have sought refuge 1,500 kilometres away in a different direction, 3,000 kilometres apart. Technology has made a big difference in terms of being able to contact people, but it's not for everyone, of course. And then I'm also competing against the fake news that's happening online on various Facebook groups, and being able to have people to be able to support, to be able to read out what's happening and not get offended themselves, and try to work out who is making these posts, to try to identify. And then people who are incarcerated in jail, they're the last people to often find out what's happening, but they hear a lot of rumours. And we need to ensure that they're part of the conversation as well. You know, sometimes, you know, like we say, you know, like when you have a common enemy, you can be friends sometimes. And that was the case in one community where the police, all three family groups, the school, the hospital, they all didn't like one thing, and that was the mobile phone. They said, so it was actually interesting. So we actually ran some educational campaigns around mobile phones just to get people together. And people says, yes, that is the problem. And for elderly people, they often think, oh, I don't use mobile phones, but that's not really a problem. And I explained to them, okay, well, see that public toilet over there? Yep. You see all the graffiti all over the walls of that toilet? Yep. It says, oh, and the old man or the old woman says, oh, there's terrible things written on those toilet doors. Yes. Well, you know what? Those messages that are on the toilet door are appearing on your mobile phone, on that kid's mobile phone and that kid's mobile phone. And the next time you go past your grandson and he's doing this, and he'll start hiding the phone like this, you say, show me what you're looking at. Yeah. And then the elderly people say, is it that bad? And I say, yes, it is that bad. In fact, they've already created a fake account of you, and then how to work that one out in a traditional way. The elders said, that is stealing, and straight away the whole community, especially the not the second generation, not the young ones. It's like to be told that you stole someone is a huge crime. And so that created another level. And so that actually brought up some old traditional values and try to work in with the contemporary issues of mobile phones. And meanwhile, I would be on the mobile phone making friends on Facebook with my fake account. And I would just print off everything. I'd say, oh yes, here's what the kids have been printing off. And the elders go, did you write that? This is, oh no, that's a fake account. Well, who is doing all this? So it was actually quite interesting because even the police were happy. They're joining forces together about this, because keep in mind, when there's a big fight, the police make an arrest. They arrest someone. And what does that family say about the police? Oh, that policeman, he's no good. He's taking sides. He shouldn't do that. He should be helping us. But he arrested my grandson, so I'm not going to speak to that police officer. Okay, so your local community police officer, he loses trust. Who steps in? The elders. The elders are fighting. So that's where mediators can come, if it's balanced, yeah? And the relationship between police and mediators becomes so important, yeah? The relationship between mediators and people who operate prisons becomes so important. Mediators who work with lawyers, yeah, because lawyers often help try to work out what's, like with their clients, with their criminal cases or something like that. They help get the information. Elders working young kids, putting positive messages on Facebook, teaching the community that this is really, really important. We are the four elders. We are together. We're all same blood. We did actually have a project around this, and this was and we actually received a bit of funding from a sympathetic government agency, and it was a community called Alikurung, ALICURNG, and if you Google that on YouTube, search on YouTube, Alikurung, and we did a music video called Alikurung Together as One. And it's about a community which is the main totem for that community is the dog, and it's the dog dreaming place. So featured in that video is the dogs, football, important for the community, and music. And we actually sponsored a music project where the lead singer, who is saying in 4 different languages, come back, because come back to our community. Alikurung is a good community. Come back. That's what he's actually singing. And the man singing was one of the victims. It was his 2-year-old daughter that was raped in that community, and he's singing. And that went, let's just say, viral. Through Facebook, because we originally posted on Facebook, and YouTube doesn't have nearly as many hits, because we actually circulated through our Facebook posts. And again, that music and just representation of song. And the interesting thing we did there was when the band came together to write the music in 4 different languages, it was inside our mediation room. And so I think he was inspired by lots of messages of hope and peace and coming together and not taking sides. So that was some very working with digital communication, and so we actually the same people did another video about COVID safety last year as well. So there are, I suppose, many ways of communication, and we're utilizing what works and what has ownership. at the end of the day. So it's not copyrighted or anything like that, but it is one of those resources that we try to create. So I think I mentioned earlier the importance of creating a physically and emotionally and culturally safe space. Needless to say, trying to create that physical safety is, I think, in most contemporary mediation is, look, if you don't want to be in the same space, well, why don't we do shuttle mediation or be in two separate areas? All these type of tools or that we can always apply. The emotional side of creating a safe space is ensuring that there is support people who can attend, and whether that be professional support like interpreters, or whether that be family members, or the people who actually have ceremonial rights, who have got the authority to support people in mediation. But the cultural safety is the huge one, and I think this is where a lot of people do struggle by applying a Western style mediation model straight into a Indigenous context. And luckily, I was actually able to witness a situation on an island in far north Queensland, where the mediation coordinator there, who had lots of skills, lots of knowledge, but had no cultural, let's just say, competencies to apply. It was fascinating to see that this mediation service was applying the 9-step process or the 13-step process, and nothing was getting worked out. It was amazing. And their statistics were amazing. They were doing like 800 mediations in 1 year, but they're the same people coming back. And I thought, what? It's like, so, and whilst the mediation centre was doing some other amazing work, but the actual mediation itself was quite interesting. And I had the opportunity to just, again, share some of the practices that that's happening on Tiwi Islands and in Central Australia. Says, hey, this is what's happening in other areas. Do you actually involve elders, and how many elders do you involve? And like the reaction was, what do you mean, how many elders? It's like, well, like there are, I'm sure in your community. Anyway, so it was just being able to ask the right questions. But within 1 year, the mediation just changed on that island. And suddenly there was 24 mediators on that island, and they're all working with the kinship groups, and suddenly things were working out really amazing. It was just, I was quite amazed to see how different it was. But what was really a learning curve for me was see that they were actually just doing the 9-step mediation process in a very remote community. And I thought, wow, this is actually quite amazing to see how it's not working. But there was one thing that the mediation group did. They did have trust, and I think that was one of the keys to be able to do it. And as for the 23 new mediators, they were sort of saying, "Oh, I was wondering when you're going to ask me to help." They were just excited. They need to part of it. They just hadn't been invited. But anyway, the good news is they actually won the Australian Crime Prevention Awards 1 year, and I gave them that idea because the Tiwi Island mediators got the award the year before. So I thought, and I think it's also useful to think about, if you are, or if my colleagues right around the world, the mediators themselves, they need support. They need to be able to celebrate. They need to be able to laugh. They need that safe space. I mean, look, this type of work that we do is very serious and quite challenging, but sometimes, unbelievably, well, we see some very funny moments sometimes as mediators, and sometimes we have some of the most amazing laughter together about some of the work that we've done, something we might have seen or something we might have heard, and then we don't laugh in front of people. Then we go back to our little office and we start then we start having a giggle. Oh my gosh, did you see that? But we need those safe environments to do that, and but being able to celebrate people's work is so important, and whether it be working in the Indigenous context. Last couple of months, last 18 months, there's quite a big news in Australia, but thanks to global warming, we've had some big wildfires, bushfires happening here, and a number of small rural towns and an island just south of here called Kangaroo Island. They had a huge fire that wiped out half the island, and I was doing a lot of community development projects, restorative projects as part of that. But and it's quite, because we're working in trauma. It is trauma-informed practice, whether you're working in Indigenous, communities, especially where there's been a high level of volatility, violence, etc., intergenerational trauma, the residual effects of colonialism. There's just a lot of trauma that we're working in, so we need to create that safe environment to be able to let off steam, be able to connect, and these type of forums are really important. One of my, I suppose, my dreams, which only came partially fruition, was last year. No thanks to COVID-19, the National Mediation Conference that's held every 2 years, and I've been serving as a board member for a number of years. Was going to be held in Central Australia. So the theme was, just imagine all the mediators from right around Australia coming to the middle, literally. And unfortunately, it became a virtual event, but we tried to showcase a lot of the interesting work that some of the mediators that I just described, and share and learn from each other. And when you go to a conference, they give you a little conference satchel with all your flyers and things like that. Well, we sent them all out to everyone right around the world, so they all got their bush medicinal tea and things like that, so they can taste from their homes while they're in lockdown. So unfortunately, it wasn't quite the same, but maybe there might be another opportunity that we can offer something like that. And I should mention our next conference is going to be in Wellington in New Zealand, with a date to be advised. So that's just, if you search National Mediation Conference Australia, it should be able to take you across to that. But we need those important, vital connections, and being able to, share food together, learn from each other, and it's and just create again opportunities for learning, and I think is something that I hadn't even considered global, but thank you, Vikram, for hosting something like this, because this is actually a great opportunities to connect, and it's been the benefit of attending on the third week is I get to see what other people have been presenting on, so that's been really fascinating, and certainly creating new linkages through LinkedIn, etc. It's been fantastic. In terms of where to from here, in terms of mediation in Indigenous communities, and I'll talk at a program level. Look, there is, again, a lot of these projects are very much reactive, and so something terrible's got to happen before money actually flows in from government. in Australia, we don't really have much in the way of philanthropic organisations that support this type of work. So it does come down to government, and usually, there's a million and one reasons why they don't want to fund some. They don't see this type of project as a priority. To argue that we do need support around this, we can certainly argue that, look, there is a cost for incarceration, there is a cost of conflict. It's not only just the cost of going through the court cases, the police resources, et cetera, but it's also an intergenerational effect. And as I described earlier in this presentation, it's about human right, and it is about promoting good governance and being able to resolve conflict in a peaceful way. And when I say peaceful way, it's not just having the right people with the knowledge, skills, and ethical understanding, but it's actually having resourced, to be able to do that. And there's been some amazing papers and amazing presentations already done, and around this subject. But at the end of the day, we need to inspire the next generation of peacemakers, but also support the elders, because again, like the Tiwi cemetery poll, if the elders aren't strong, and it's not just about having young ones who've got a big voice and they said, oh, look, I can do this, but we need to involve the top. And that's the challenge. Australia being a migrant country, we do see a lot of refugees come from often quite challenging war-torn situations. The elders are they need a lot of support. Some of them don't even have the ability to get employment. They might have been engineers or even lawyers back in their home country, but their qualification is not recognised in Australia. And then they're stuck in a way. And then you got the young ones who are either sometimes getting into a lot of trouble with gangs, for example. But then you got the young ones also saying, our elders are useless, and it's a big challenge. And I guess one thing we've learned from this type of work in Aboriginal communities is the strength of the mediation really depends on how strong the culture is. If something I've noticed coming across to South Australia from Northern Territory, and I'm just talking very, very, very broadly. In Australia, there's been touching on colonisation. There was a history of the authorities taking away children from their families. And this was often facilitated by church as well. And so there is a lot of, proportionately, should I say, since moving to the more urban south, the number of people I've met who are known as the stolen generation is proportionally a lot higher. And there's a challenge for them to reconnect. And it is a race against time. And I'm not saying that out of my mouth, but it's what the elders are saying here in the urban area, that the knowledge, if not kept, will be lost. And I think Helen, I think there used to be about 300 languages right around Australia. I think only 40 are actually spoken on a regular basis anymore. So, and I think, as we all appreciate in our line of work, language is so important. Not only does it help communicate, it's actually quite an amazing thing. So you have a thought in your head, and you've got electrical pulses that go to your throat, and you sort of, breathing out something, and then this thing vibrates and it comes out my mouth as I'm breathing out, and that's electronically picked up through the camera, and now you can hear it on screen. It's actually quite an amazing thing that we're actually able to do, and it's not even on a telephone or app or anything like that. But when we describe things, I mean, this is where my bilingualism, and I'm sure many of the mediators who've also presented can speak many different languages, have grown up with different languages. Words don't often mean the same thing. And the way we use metaphors, for example, has so much depth and so much resonates in different ways with people, and to lose that, or to not protect that, would be really, really challenging. They're one of the largest language groups in the Northern Territory. It's called the Warlpiri language, and even the Warlpiri language, depending on which area, which community you live in, some people say, I actually speak the higher level Warlpiri language, whereas you speak the basic Warlpiri, and some words in mediation about peace should be using the high level. It's a more, in an English sense, it might be like speaking English, but some people prefer to use Latin or Shakespearean quotes to add something more to it. So it's part of the training that we've been working with. So on Tiwi Islands, we've recorded everything that we're able to in Tiwi language, and also with Warlpiri language. I think I've got 2 versions of the mediation training manual. But again, a training manual is a very Western concept, but it's still the pictures that they use. It's the way they position the words on the page as well. Like sometimes, that word should be up here, not here, or all those, or this word should be done in different colors, or this arrow should be going this way, or we need to include people sitting down in there. So it's actually quite a very artistic sort of expression, but it works in terms of being able to visualize. About last week, one of my colleagues in one of the communities, she was upset because the young girls were fighting over jealousy, and so I just went to my iPad and just found some old pictures from the training we did, and just said, so like is it like this? And I sent it by text. It's easier to send things by text message than email, because it's on their phone straight away. And then she just looked at the picture and goes, "Oh yes, like that. Yes, like that. Like, yes, we need to get people together." And that mother, she shouldn't be taking sides. She should, and just being able to just remind them. So it's good to have that repository of information. But again, now it's a digital world. I mean, we can access them through my website, and so, but there's more and more places. But again, funding for community mediation is so important, and some of the workshops we've done in the past, where we did some diagrams, that still stays up there in the community. So sometimes there might be a fight at school, bullying or something like that. They just look at the wall and go, "Oh yeah." So it's almost like a checklist. They go, "Okay, so we should involve the police, parents, clinic, old age," and then they can actually think about who else should be involved, because like with any mediation, it needs to start with the right people. It's the who, where, when, and how. And as a I suppose like a long-term coordinator, is the how question is where we really struggle with because of the lack of resources. Yeah, we can keep on, like reinstilling the community knowledge about who. Yep, that's good. Like people are feeling and where. It's like, oh, okay, maybe this time we'll do the meeting over there where it's a little bit quiet, rather than there, because last time we got interrupted by dogs or young kids or babies crying or things like that. Yeah, and when just it's very fluid. I mean, like there are many competing obligations in the community. It could be a funeral happening in the community, or it could be that it's not possible to have the meeting because the young man that we need to talk to is in jail. So we need to work out how to make all that happen. We have been able to address a few of the hows, like, because, mobile phone has become an amazing sort of tool, and mobile phone coverage, I mean, it is getting better and better. And look, while some people would argue, it's like, yes, many people who live in communities don't have mobile phones, but I sort of shake my head and go, no, I think they have. I think a lot of people have mobile phones, but they may not have credit on their phones, but if they get on Wi-Fi, because it's an important communication tool. And if no one had mobile phone in the community, well, how come the gossip is so quick to spread? So yeah, and of course, the distance factor. I mean, like, from one community to another community, 3-hour drive, 2-hour drive. It's always like that. And sometimes, in the wet season where there's monsoons, we may not be able to get to these places. So there's many things that, like, we've got knowledge, but like, again, there's always opportunities, and I'm pretty positive that that things will only just get, like better and better gradually. But I guess we're not looking for another person to do another report. We're just looking for people to actually do the work. That's the challenge. And again, to make all this happen, which is a bit like putting gasoline, is to get funding to do this. And it's a bit sad to rely on this, but right now, I mean, like, the reality is we all volunteer our time. That's what's happening. We just get phone calls from communities and says, oh, I'm really upset, and say, oh, look, it's one of the mediators I might have worked with, and she's just, and they just want to have a chat because they're upset because one of the other mediators in the community aren't being ethical about what they're supposed to be doing. And then it's like, okay, so we need to talk about that. Let's unpack it. Let's have a chat. And it's it's not always about like flying with a plane and putting a parachute and coming down and saying, I've come to. So it's nothing like that at all. It's actually a lot of the work is just done at very, very quiet level, but just going back to the core principles about what we try to do as collectively. I really, so listening to the previous presenters from, Israel, from Africa, it's like, again, I mean, like, the context that everyone's working is varies quite a lot. The historical context, the cultural context. But what I'm picking up as a common thread is that the developing the cultural competencies, being able to work in this space is really critical for this type of work. And look, I might look at, unless you have any questions, Vikram, I'm sort of open to any
definitely.
comments.
That definitely has to happen. We have to discuss that. But the important thing that you came out with in the end was that now work has to be done on the ground. It's not the theoretical aspect of it and all. There is actually work, and funding seems to be an issue, I think. And for me, I mean, I keep saying, I put out on my website also support, because there is so much to do. I mean, like, I don't know whether you read about these mediation circles that I want to develop in every corner of the world, in every school, every community. So that's going to be, I mean, there is a plan which will keep happening. It's not going to be limited by funding. So that is going to happen. But yes, there is so much to do. There's lots to do. But importantly, what I thought was, let's just start with putting out where what you are talking about, when you, because I mean, people are, of course, can always search, but let's just put it out there. So this is where Tiwi Island is.
Yes.
And then let us go down. This is Darwin, where you are.
That's right. Yep, that's where I was. Yep. So yeah. I'm in Adelaide, which is south. So Darwin is Larrakia country. And historically, as I said, World War II, more bombs were dropped on Darwin than Hawaii in Pearl Harbor. So that's quite a strategic place for Australia. Larrakia had a very long tradition of trading with the Masakans, which is to the north, Indonesia, with the sea cucumber trade. And the Tiwi Islands actually have still have a ceremonial dance called the bombing of Darwin dance, which involves people flying, literally.
Well, I think the only closest shirt I could find was the Indonesian one. So I said, let me wear that. There was nothing from the Aboriginal community from Australia. Okay, so this is where you are. And then you said about the Northern Territory here and Queensland on this side. So let's just give a broad idea where we are, what we're talking about. And then because I think what important thing that, of course, came out was the aspect of to start with the movie. Crocodile Dundee got so much interest and people came there. And I keep saying that movies can actually influence so much. I feel that mediation also, I think, needs to be taken up in movies, which has not happened. I think that lots, and it can actually help. I'm telling you, it can actually help and develop a culture. But tell me, have you thrown a boomerang? Is it how does it actually? I mean, you actually have used it. I mean, of course, for recreational purpose. Have you tried?
So I think most of the boomerangs I've seen in shops are actually not made in Australia. And there are two types of boomerangs. Some are non-returning boomerangs, and they're used for, they're called sevens because they look like a seven. And they have more destructive force, and they're often used more so in Central Australia. They do return. The other type of boomerangs, they actually do return. It's quite amazing. And to put in context, if you see a boomerang, it would be used more in an area where there's not many trees for obvious reasons, because so in the Northern Territory, there'd be more spears that be used, and what's called a woomera, which is like a throwing stick. So it has more accuracy.
But you've tried throwing it and it works. You have been able to get it back.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because that should be interesting to see that. Dangerous stuff, but it is a lethal thing. Okay, so this was what the paintings you were talking about.
That's right, yeah. So we're looking at, this is Kakadu in particular, and the one that's on the top row, that's an X-ray style of a barramundi fish, and you can see that they've actually taken a fair bit of effort to depict that. The one that's you've got your finger, the pointer on, which is the man's with his hands spread apart. That one there, yep. That one is from Norlangi Rock. It's actually a spirit, and this one actually is quite a unique one, because that actually depicts quite a significant spirit that if you do not follow the proper laws, this spirit can actually come out from the rocks and actually attack you, and it's quite a threatening pose, as you can see. Whereas the one below, if you can just go, just stay on that one. It's all right. But you can see that the styles are quite different. Because yes, okay. So you got one. You got that skull there. on the left-hand side of the skull. Can you open that one? Yeah, so that one on just next to that, on the right-hand side of that picture, you'll see like a white figure, and it's got like a line from the head to the hand to the toes. It's like yep, that's one. Yeah. That's actually a lightning, and it's known as the Namagoman, and that one has the stone axe that hits the sky and hits the ground and creates a lightning. Northern Territory's got renowned for one of the highest levels of lightning strikes in the world, and this one is quite has a big cultural connection, even with people from right around the world, because I think in every culture there is a lightning spirit, and it's something to be revered and also to be respected as well. So and quite feared in many respects too. So
right. So interesting paintings.
Mm.
So, of course, the Ali Kurung that you said, Ali Kurung, that part of it, I was looking for that. I mean,
so if you type in
the one that you together as one is what you're talking about.
Yeah, Ali Kurung together as one. Yeah,
together as one, because I found something. Of course, I can't play anything from YouTube, only because YouTube has a copyright issue. So that part of it sometimes becomes. But this one is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, people can watch.
Yeah, so we've got what 31,000 views on that one. So but that's on YouTube. The Facebook one has probably 5 times more because but again, certainly that was a powerful message in that one.
So I mean, when you said about how complex speaking is, they say 100 muscles are used for speaking. Yeah. So it's a complex activity, speaking. So that's it. So, but are we actually relooking jails? Because this whole colonial concept of jails that we got, and what communities do, are they actually, I mean, can communities work out handling criminal cases separately? Is it given sanctioned by the constitution or something?
So this whole question about why they're going in jail in the first place needs to be the question. I mean, that's, incarceration is a result of failures of government policy and colonization. Look, in terms of there are some innovations happening in the courts. They have what's called the Nunga courts here in South Australia, where family members have an opportunity to contribute to what type of sentencing they can provide, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that there are ending up in with legal issues, and this is a big issue that as a country that working with First Nations, while there's a lot more recognition that the First Nations and talking about the elders past, present and future, but in order to support the future and to have a proper dialogue is the level of disadvantage. I mean, we talk about the starting line is often very, very different for Indigenous people in this country, and to be able to provide that to equalise that, it's a challenge. And what I'm seeing is that look, there has been a lot of things that the country still needs to address, and a lot of healing needs to occur, especially in respect to the stolen generation. And we have to call for what it is. Lateral violence is a huge problem in communities, and lateral violence just thrives in countries or situations where there has been colonial past. One of the best drivers of best drivers. Sorry, it's probably not the right word, but like that fan or fuel lateral violence is mobile phones. It's like we have a saying. It's called the tall poppy syndrome, but I've heard it said in a different way. It's called the black poppy syndrome. It's like people who are there to seek change, etc. They're often being dragged down. So the balance is really a challenge. But I think there's been a lot of great reports written about lateral violence, and I think that would be being able to identify that would be really, really critical in terms of having a future.
Because I think that aspect of how communities have been handling criminal cases, because we had someone from India, he's a very senior, I mean, I like to say the grand old man of mediation in India. He was talking about some community in a particular part of India where in case of a murder, the offender was to take care of the family of the victim. So he would work, and large part of what he would earn would go to the victim's family. So I mean, there's so many ways that people have been looking at it. So because the jail system, I mean, being a colonial system, and the whole concept of people and them actually being able to change, so many things have happened over time, but that jail concept still stays the medieval concept kind of thing. So I think we need to look at it and learn from communities. I don't know how much of that is being recorded.
Sure. And like in Australia, like in terms of where we are at, in terms of being able to offer mediation, is all post-sentencing. So there's no provision by default to allow for mediation to occur as part of the criminal justice process. And look, that is something that will take big steps to to make that happen. I think look, I'm not saying I think, but I know that there would be strong pushback to say that, oh look, mediation is not there to pervert the course of justice or something like that, and that would be an unfortunate argument. But I'd like to see enlightenment happen. Not only in this country, but also in Japan as well. I mean, there's still a lot to be said about how, the administration of justice is delivered.
Well, the thing is that of course, all of us have a penal code which has been given to us, and I have to in a way shock people in relation to what year our penal code is, what we use today itself. So Ippei, you will have to take a guess. What year is our penal code?
Sorry, can you say that again?
What year is our penal code? What, do you have any idea? Just a guess.
Oh my goodness.
Just a guess. I mean, of course, like I said, idea is to shock you. So based on that, you can try and guess.
100, I don't know, 100 years or something like that, or
1860.
1860. Okay.
We are in 2022. Can you imagine?
Wow. Yeah.
So this is what the colonizer gave us. And countries have continued to use it because it helps the what I call the neo-colonizers, the new governments who came up after that. So there's a lot of reform that has to happen, which, like you said, big steps, major steps have to be taken. How it's going to happen, I don't know, because I mean, I'm saying that in relation to what the communities have, that knowledge that is available, the fact that a community has to exist together, I think first we have to get communities together. We have to create that. Again, we have a symposium in September on colonization, decolonization, and mediation. I'm saying this entire divide and rule policy that came in, where communities had to be broken up. If you have to rule over, I mean, you can imagine that, say in India, at that point of time, today we have 1.3 billion. That time we were 300 million. But how many people did we have? I mean, who were ruling them? Maybe the bureaucrats were 5,000 bureaucrats, maybe. Over 300 million people. So how do you do that? You divide communities. So I think
divide and conquer. So it's an old technique that's been still used and it is it's sadly being perfected by some colonizers, isn't it? So
yeah. No, but what I'm trying to do is, I've been saying that we have to actually identify these people with the mediator mindset in communities, and of course they get valued by the communities. They have to be valued by communities, because that has also changed over time. And then after that, these should be your leaders. So mediators as leaders and leaders as mediators is one of the topics in my conference, which I did in May and June. That schedule is also out there on my website. So
one of my mentors, Dr. Peter Adler, doesn't refer to mediation. He refers to leadership, like you say. Yeah. And I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, because the person I was having that discussion is from Australia, Sarah Blake. Of course, she's coming up next week. And this is what of course, she has also works with Indigenous communities in Australia. And she talks about this aspect of the leaders, them having that mediator mindset. So we have to build, I think we have to build communities, build that culture of mediation, and learn from various methods that have been used. So a lot of work, Ippei, a lot of work.
No, it's very rewarding work, but at the same time, I mean, like it is the great joy that I have when we do reconnect as mediators, regardless of what context we work, and I think that's it's valuable, and something we often I suppose bring conversations together. At the end is it's about the mediator sort of position. It's about the trust and also being able to understand the balance.
Yep.
But at the end, because a lot of people ask us, about what we do in communities, what's a mediator do? And we said, okay, well, there's three things. It's about trying to offer trust, balance, and then we try and walk away with one story. And I think we talked about confidentiality briefly. As you all know, I mean, like, maintaining confidentiality in a small community is almost impossible. However, it is important that we can speak openly, but before everyone finishes their discussion, that everyone walks away with one story, because when people walk away, their cousins and their uncles and their aunties are going to say, hey, what happened at that meeting? We all need to be on that one story. And that one story could be, we didn't fix everything, but we're meeting tomorrow again. That's okay. That's a good one story, because we are, my friends, we're all competing with fake news on this, and it doesn't matter small what community you're in. We need to get that one story out strong. It's part of this, and I guess this opportunity, if there is one story from this, is just want to acknowledge the opportunity, and also just the amazing network that this might potentially ignite, because every fire starts with a flame, doesn't it? So
absolutely. Well, I think the idea now is to, of course, this was a much smaller event. I think maybe about 35 or whatever speakers in this one. But next year, I actually want to do a much larger one. So I think we have about 34 speakers in this one. So let's have a much larger event next year. This was a thought I had. I mean, look, connecting the right people also is important. So getting the right people in. So we'll have to then get voices from every corner. But let me just Madhu had commented on LinkedIn. I have huge respect for Ippei, what he does for the community. Okay, so Madhu is your a fan? Is it a fan?
No, Madhu is one of the remote community mediators. He's been working with me for many years, and he's another inspirational man. He comes from Nepal, and we've been doing lots of interesting work together. So, and we continue to do so. And
he joined us for Ken Cloke's inaugural address. He came in there. And he introduced himself also. So he has the Zoom link which he met me on before Ken Cloke's one. If he wants to join us, he can join us and say hi to you. And then there is Wale from Nigeria who wants to say good morning to you. So that's
lovely connect.
So So Ippei, thank you very much. But any concluding remarks, anything that you want to say?
Just wanted to just remind everyone, like, yes, it is sometimes lonely work, but it's, again, these type of forums are really important. So thank you for the opportunity, and let's continue the conversation. And I'm really keen to learn from right around the world too. So thank you for the opportunity.
Perfect. And then you said about lonely work. There's Michael Lang in the US. He has these reflective practice groups. I did have a few sessions with him on that. He had one group of his Irish group coming in. So I'm going to be developing that and have a reflective, a whole activity. Let's get people from various parts together and they can discuss their issues and everything that they've gone through. So perfect. Thank you very much, Ippei. And please join us for other sessions on the 31st. It might be a little late for you, but there is a session on learnings and key takeaways, which starts at 7 o'clock India time. So which would be 11 o'clock your time. I mean, right now, what is the time there with you?
It's 4:40 p.m.
So yeah, so 7 o'clock will be 11 o'clock at night for you. But please one day stay up late and let's see, meet everyone and just give your thoughts. Right?
Thank you.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Ippei.